For the first thing, all debt is not bad. We all have mortgages on our home, at least I certainly do. And what I do is I leverage my income, my annual income, to pay for housing and assets that I deem appropriate and necessary to sustain me. The company does that also. Debt for the company then transfers the burden.
Oh, sorry.
Quit pushing that.
Sorry.
Transfers the burden from existing ratepayers to all ratepayers, present and future. And what that means is that if we didn't use debt financing for special projects, large projects, then what we would be doing is having to create funds out of current revenues, current rates that all customers pay, create some bank balances that could then fund large assets when we buy them. So if we're going to buy $1 million in assets, then under that scenario, we'd have to have $1 million in the bank to pay for it. By using debt financing, then we move that burden from not only the current ratepayers, but to the future ratepayers who are going to have the advantage of use of that asset. So if we buy a generator that's going to last for 30 years, it ought to be the current and the future ratepayers that pay for that over the life of the asset. So that's, I think, an important thing to keep in mind is debt for an electric utility industry is typical and traditional. It isn't, it's just a factor that most businesses use in managing the cash flow, managing the funds and the resources to get their large projects done. But just like a home mortgage, you have to decide what your income is that will allow you to cover that debt. And you got to make reasonable and prudent decisions, and you have to satisfy the requirements of the financial institutions to whom you're going to borrow the money from, such as the bonding agencies. You have to satisfy their needs to do that. The company doesn't rely on debt to fund all projects. Historically, we've put $800,000 to $1 million a year out of operating revenues into next year's capital projects. What we've done with the strategic plan is, number one, identify a series and a sequence of large capital projects that are necessary at this time to sustain our ability to serve customers at the level that they're accustomed to getting served. In that, then, the strategic plan incorporates some successive rate increases, which at this time we've predicted at 4.5%, to keep the company in a good financial position, to satisfy its debt service requirements, and to satisfy its operating and maintenance requirements for the company, plus maintain some sort of balance for dividends and other things like that. We have to always look at our debt options. Right now, we're looking at large capital projects. We're not committed to any debt service options other than the current bonds that we have at this time. The Section 138 to 46 kV line project has been funded by previous bond issues, by impact fees, and by current operating revenues and reserve funds. So we're not looking at any additional financing required for the Section 1 project that will be constructed this year.
I thought I asked you at the rate hearing, Mr. Stewart, what we were going to do to pay for that additional $7.7 million that was needed over the next 4 years, and you said you didn't know. So now you're telling us that we have enough money in the bank, and with maybe one projected rate increase, we won't need to do the additional
That's not what I said. I said we have enough money in the bank to pay for this year's capital project.
Okay,
if you look at the strategic plan, it's set out very detailed there.
What you just said made me think, though, that we don't need additional bonding needs in the future, and so I'm trying to clarify what's going to happen over the next 4 years compared to what you just said.
I'm not saying we don't need additional bonding needs. I'm saying we will need additional financing. We will need to incur additional debt. What we need at this time is to structure our rate of return on our revenues that can give us the ability to fund that additional debt at reasonable rates for our customers. So in order to get through that, the first thing I'd like to cover would be our bonds. There's been a lot of misinformation disseminated about our bonds, and so Joe's prepared a little presentation on that. Just be aware, when you start a bond, the very first thing you do to initiate a bond analysis is what's called a parameters resolution. A parameters resolution. What a parameters resolution is, it's a resolution that's approved by the board of directors, and it establishes the parameters under which the company would entertain additional debt through bonding. In the parameters resolutions that we have used, the last one in 2012, the parameters included a maximum interest rate. It also included a condition that the debt service obligation of the company would not increase. So if we're spending $1 million a year servicing debt, which we're not, but if we were, that over the period of that bond, that debt service would not be exceeded. And that was accomplished in the 2012 bond, which Joe will give you a review of.
Okay.
Mr. Dunbeck.
In the public hearing and then subsequently, there's been misinformation and misleading information provided to the public. And I'd like to review that with you. And as Mr. Stewart's already pointed out, there's been suggestions that the company's headed for a train wreck. I think that was repeated several times during the public hearing. The thing that gets lost in a lot of our discussion, and probably Ms. Franco, apology for interrupting her, but it's really important, is the strategic plan. If you look at where we're at right now, and we're asking for a 4.5% increase, it could sound like it's come out of the blue. We're in trouble. We need a 4.5% increase. The 4.5% increase is found in the strategic plan and has been there for at least 2 years and probably longer. I didn't go back and check it out. The capital improvements that we're talking about have been included in the strategic plan throughout that time period. What we are doing is attempting to implement the strategic plan. So, yeah, we're moving in that direction. We know we're going to need additional financing to fund it, and that's the plan that we currently have. If you do that, I'll mess it up. Okay, here's the first thing that I handed out was the long-term debt. And it's kind of hard to see, that's why. But the long-term debt is listed on the first 2 pages of the handout. The reason why I did that was that there was some confusion concerning what debt we have and what debt's been refinanced. If you look at this, you'll see that in 2002, we issued bonds for $4.9 million. And it lists the coupon rate and the uses to which those bonds were put. Those bonds were refinanced by the 2012 refinancing, not by the 2010 bonds. And so that's really an important distinction because when we're comparing interest rates, we've got to have the right bonds. In 2005, we had a cap lease for $2.6 million, 4.75% interest, and we purchased a gas generator with that. The 2010 A bonds refinanced and paid off the cap lease. The 2010 A bonds still exist, and we're still paying those. The other bonds, next page, are the 2010 B bonds, which are called Build America Interest Subsidy bonds. These are the ones that were confused during the public hearing as being the refinancing mechanism for the 2002 bonds.
Joe, before we go there, can we look, so the 2005 cat lease is gone.
Correct. Correct.
And it's rolled over into the 2010, so it went from 2.6 million down to 1.7.
Correct.
And that's rolled over into that bond, and the interest rate went from 4.7 to,
Well, I've got a bunch. The coupon rate was between 3 and 5. The yield was 1.2 to 4.64. The average coupon was 4.64, which is less than the 4.75. What we call the true interest cost, which is the 4.25, is the interest if you do all of the expenses and or the full bond amount and the discounted income stream from the payments. So the 4.25 is probably as accurate as anything we have. And we paid off the cap lease.
Joe, what is the true interest rate on page 2 for the 2010 B bonds?
I don't have it. That's why it's blank. The 2010 B bonds are the bonds that were identified as being at 7% interest. But the interest is subsidized by 35%, so the effective rate is all, and the all-inclusive is 4.9. And then the 2012 bonds are at the end. And I'd like to take, I'd like to take the 2012 bonds separately so that we can talk about them. So the 2012 bonds were new money. Excuse me, the 2010 B bonds were new money, and this shows that the aggregate debt service now. Jay asked about it. As of today, or roughly today, we have two bonds: 2010 bonds and 2012 bonds. Okay. The 2010 bonds, you can see the bond subsidy here. So these are not really 7% bonds, they're more in the neighborhood of 4.5 to 5% bonds. The other thing that was said during the hearing is that we were facing an almost doubling of our debt service coverage in 2025. This is all of our bond debt, and as you can see, in 2025, we go up a little bit from 707 to 728, but then for the rest of the time period, we're actually less than what our prior bond service was. And the reason is that these prior bonds, the 2012 bonds, are paid off before 2025, and then we're just left with the 2010 B bonds. So it was inaccurate to suggest that we're facing some kind of Armageddon in 2025, given that these interest rates show that we actually have a reduction in the interest rate.
now there's the two bonds though in that 2010, there's the A and the B.
And this is the total.
And that's the total.
And this information is shown in let me think if I can remember, 2012. If you look at the official statement of the 2012 bonds, it shows these numbers in this computation. Okay, let's look over the next one then. Oh, thank you.
Well, I have some questions for you. I'm looking at the bond
On the
agreement.
2002 bonds,
John, what do you think?
No, I have some questions for you, because on the bond agreement that I was sent by the auditor, because I couldn't get it from you, it's saying here on page 7 that the Build America bonds, right, the Series 2010 B bonds,
right.
currently outstanding in a total amount of $6.275 million. See, that's different from this $4.8 million.
Well, I can't respond to that. The numbers I gave you were correct. That's all I can tell
Well,
you.
I'm going by the information you've given me, and
I
I'm trying to
didn't
get
give
it
you
to
that
match.
information.
Yes, the auditor gave it to me
No, that's
because
not
Blaine
me.
wouldn't give it to me. And I'm trying to match this up because, you know, this is saying 4.8. I wish it were 4.8, but this one's saying 6.2 million.
If you look at, flip back, are they combining the 2010 A bonds with the 2010 B bonds?
Well, I'll keep looking, but this is the paragraph that's talking about the Build America bonds for 6.275 million, so I'll try to add that
I
up.
need one clarification. I did send you the documents that were provided also by
I also
I
did receive it from the auditor.
Is that not correct? Did I also not send you those documents?
I say I did receive it
If
from
you'd like
the
to see the
auditor.
email that transmitted them.
That
I'd
was
be happy
after
to
I
pull it
received
up.
it from the auditor. Blaine.
Okay, let's talk about
But I
2000.
also send it to you. Let's clarify that. Did I or did I
I'll
not
go
send it
back
to
and
you?
look at my emails. I'll go back and look at
Oh,
my
I can
emails.
pull it up right now.
That's fine. I'm just saying that this paragraph is saying 6.275 million, so I'm just wondering what the difference is. And I'm trying to add it up right now.
But-
7.4.
Okay, the
So that's
2000,
more than this then. Okay.
the 2002 bonds are refinanced by the 2012 bonds. Now, there's a page that puts both of those bonds on the same page, which is right there. Okay. This is 4.9,
Add those up.
4.9,
Wait, 6. You're right, 6.1.
ready? Okay, in 2002, we'll just review quickly, 4.9 principal, interest 3.25% to 5%, coupon rate. I don't have any more information on that bond right now, so we're gonna have to go with that. So there's the coupon rate, 2002 refinanced by the 2012 bonds. At the public hearing, it was specifically said that Mr. Stewart had made a mistake because he had said that the interest rate was lower on the 2012 bonds than the 2002 bonds. It's in fact accurate, and in fact as we dig into it, we find that it's even more than accurate because of how much money we got from the refinancing in 2012. So we started out with $3.96 million. How did we get there? We signed a bond for $3.7 million, okay? Then we had a premium of $225,000. $255,000. Okay, what is the premium? The premium means that when the investors came in to look at our bonds, they said, hey, I'll pay more than $375,000. I'll pay you $255,000 extra. What that means is we have a debt of $375,000, but we've got $3.96 million in money. So we received a $255,000 premium in connection with the transaction. And then what happens when you do that, so I've got this much money, 3.9, but I'm paying debt on 3.75. Well, guess what happens? Your yield rate goes way down. So here it's 2% to 4%, which is the coupon rate on the 3.75. But if you look at the amounts actually paid and the interest, the yield is 0.5% to 2.75%. And then we have the true interest cost and the all-in cost as well. So, if you look at the first cut, let's look at the interest. We started at 3.25 to 5. On a coupon rate, we ended up with 2 to 4%, clearly less. But we also ended up with, we paid off the bonds at the favorable interest rate. We also got cash, additional cash of $624,000. So, what did we do? We borrowed. We didn't borrow. We signed a note for $375,000 and we paid off this debt plus walked away with $624,000. This $624,000 is going to be used out on the highway in connection with the Highway 40 loan. The thing you need to understand about the 2012-2002 bonds is when we took this to the board, and that Blaine mentioned the parameters resolution. When we took it to the board said, yeah, you can refinance, but we do not want any additional debt service. So refinance, get the benefit of the additional interest reduction, but when you're done, the debt service can't be any higher. So what we've ended up with here is we did that. So our debt service isn't higher, but because of the favorable interest rate and the premium, we not only were paying the same amount we did up here, actually less, and we ended up with $624,000. So it was really irresponsible to suggest that there was not a benefit of refinancing the 2002 from 2012 bonds.